You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
I know it's a shocker, folks. We made it here live on location, presented by Bet365. Leafs Morning Take at Love Exile Winery Bar. What do you want to say? Go ahead, Rosie.
A shocker that who made it here
All
today.
All of us. It was a great time in Nashville, first and foremost. But Hutz, thank you for having us, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, good to be here, buddy. It's always nice coming back to Nashville. And obviously getting the Leafs and Preds tomorrow at Bridgestone is going to be unbelievable. I think everyone's a little slow today, though. There was a lot of fun was had, and I think a lot of fun's going to be had today too, eh, Rosie?
Well, Nashville usually comes up and grabs you on day one. We were no different, but man, it feels like we've been here for a little while. We're only on day two. Big nights tomorrow night. We're kind of in the middle there between two hockey games. Obviously, good result yesterday. Had a quick show there on After Dark. Zach Phillips.
Yes, sir. Great job.
Nicky made his imprint on that one, which we appreciated. But excited for tomorrow night, too.
Yeah, I think that's important for tomorrow night, knowing that what we got going on. So I think there's going to be a lot of fun that's had. And you might have a little mic issue here. You want me to hear?
Yeah, you're hosting, okay? I was going to have you host the show here. Appreciate that. For now, we'll figure it out. I want to mention as well, our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with the Super Chat proceeds from our Super Chat. We'll go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and third in the world. As mentioned, we're live here at Love Exile Bar. Hut's your got minority stake. I know you can't talk right now, but you want to break it down how you came to be here?
Yeah, me and Rosie can share here. We're good teammates. Eh? Good. We're glue guys. Eh? It's Rosie, me, and you, room guys. Honestly, I played here for 3 years. I had a condo, and the city was just booming, right? It was, you could see it growing everywhere you looked. There was cranes and stuff, and I didn't know how long I'd last in the NHL. Truthfully, you guys had seen me play. There were some bad nights, so I honestly was, at the point where I just wanted to invest in something. I wanted to be part of it, and I became good friends with the owner, the main owner here, Tyler Elkin. So he got involved. There was a way for us to stay together, and I invested some money. We bought the building. His love was wine, and I've learned a lot from him, and it's grown, and it's been awesome. And the city's booming. You guys see it, so it's been cool to be part of.
This place is so surreal. It's like my 4th time here. But what was it like to be a player in Nashville?
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I feel like that's when they really started to brand the Preds, right? The gold standard, right? And I told the story just the other day to a few people. I remember my first year was we had blue helmets still, and it was funny because I remember Webby, I think Shea, the big unit. He comes in one day and he's like, guys, they have people trying on gold helmets on the ice. So what they did is they got staff members, like interns and anyone who could skate, I think, and they put different style gold helmets on them, and they made them go skate on the rink so the owners would sit up top and see what the helmets look like. So they established that they wanted to create the gold standard. And looking back now, the guys were rattled. We hate change, right? So guys are like, why are we getting gold helmets? This is so dumb. And now it's like, when you think of gold, you think of the Preds and what they've built, and it's been pretty cool to be a part of.
So, I remember the first time I came to Nashville was probably 2010. Unbelievable still. Tennessee, the South, Nashville. But, Broadway was kind of like still mom and pa shops a little bit. And I'm not talking about 1975. I'm talking about 2010. It's not very long ago. You come back now, and this place has just boomed. And you were kind of there to see that transition. Was there a lot of electricity around this city, and to be part of it? You go down Broadway, you see the Bridgestone Arena, that big beautiful thing just right smack dab in the middle of all the action, and the fans have in return also got behind that team quite a bit in your era.
Yeah, I think early in my career it was not necessarily the most hockey knowledgeable place, and I don't want to say that bad, but you play in Canadian markets, and you grow up where if the Leafs are having a bad game, you're going to hear it, right? Where here it was just more like, hey, let's get drunk and let's party. The Preds are playing. Win or lose, there was no repercussions for a bad game. It's not like I would walk out on the street and you would hear it. They just wanted to support you. And then I think that Stanley Cup run, it was the year I left. Maybe that was they had to just get rid of me and they went to the Cup final. But I blame Pekka anyway. I was just making sure his coffee was warm most of the time. But he honestly was they went on a run, and it built something, and it just slowly grew. And you see it now. I got some friends here that came down as well. We did a bachelor party. My buddy Ryan Hladnik was here. We did their bachelor party here. And now looking back, we're walking around seeing the places. We went go-karting today, the place we went, and everything's grown and changed, and downtown is unbelievable. I think they've done a good job of keeping it still the building's the same in the sense of the old brick, and it kind of has that old school feel to it. And man, it's a lot of fun.
A lot of fun as well because the Maple Leafs are playing some good hockey right now, which is a far cry from last weekend where the sky was falling. We're like, oh shit, the season's over. And Zach Phillips and producer Vic are losing their minds and everybody's going nuts. But we're feeling better about this team. We're going to dive into that conversation.
You had your turn last night.
I had a bit of a turn,
if I recall.
And I gotta shout out the folks here too. Thank you for joining us live here, first ever Nation Vacation. So appreciate that, and it's cool to have a crowd for once. Obviously, we're on YouTube and we know there's people watching and stuff like that. But I think from that perspective, I did have a bit of a turn last night just because the PTSD. But we're going to get into that conversation as well. I wanted to give a shout out as well to Waymore's, where we're staying. Fantastic location. So if you come down to Nashville, check out Waymore's, and also Love Exile Winery and Bar.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's been a good. I think we're going to have some fun. You know, I think the way things are going right now, things are looking up for the Leafs, though.
Yeah, we're feeling good. At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to try my best to infiltrate the chat in today's show. A little difficult. Obviously, we don't have any thing to put our stuff on here, but at the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Roll Up to Win is back at Tim Hortons, and that means you could win millions of amazing prizes, which is a swipe of a thumb. Imagine turning your routine Tim's run into an unforgettable vacation with Sell-Off Vacations, a $1,000 racket and cash prize, or an all-new, all-electric 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz. You only have until March 23rd. So open up that Tim's app and get rolling. Play Roll Up to Win today. Rules apply. Canada only. No purchase necessary. Visit the Tim's app for details. So, boys, we're here in Nashville, Rosie. 3 straight wins. How are we feeling about this team right now?
Well, I was just laughing because, like, as much as Leafs Nation has the sky's falling mentality, they're just as quick to bounce back with, hey, maybe we got something here. It doesn't take long. I mean, we're talking about, 10 days difference here?
Even, yeah.
And I think that's the scrutiny of it. We were talking yesterday on the After Dark show about the difference, like Twitter. I'm kind of new to Twitter since doing this job. I stayed away from it when I was playing and had no reason to afterwards. And then all of a sudden I'm like, all right, we're doing some Leaf stuff. Let's get on board here. And I saw right away that there's certain people that think this and certain people that think that, and they're going to yo-yo back and forth based on, literally one performance, which is kind of wild. And as a player, I remember you didn't think that way. It wasn't like we just lost. This is garbage. We have to overhaul everything. What is with this forecheck? I want to mix the lines up, and then we just won. It's like, we're winning everything this year, boys. Let's fuck. It's crazy to think that way. That's not how hockey works. It's not how sports works, but it's how fans work. In their mind, you should win every game. You should look perfect all the time, and you should have all your holes plugged every single night. But the fact is, we are on the other side of it, and I think it's because we don't have control. We just sit and we watch and we analyze what we see. And sometimes it's shit, sometimes it's amazing, and you're just going to roll with the punches, right? But this team, I think, without a doubt, no matter what side of all that fence you're on or whose team you're on with Twitter, all the BS, I think this team's got a lot going for it. And we see it, and no team is perfect, but what they have going on, and I will compare it to teams in the past, I think there's a lot to go on here. And I do have high expectations for this team. Yes, I'll be disappointed if they have another first-round exit. There's no question. But I don't think that's going to happen. I know they might have a tough opponent, but I think they've got a lot more going for it than they have in the past.
I agree. I think the fact of the matter here, Rosie, is the fact that they haven't done it in the playoffs, right? So I feel like that is the black cloud over this team and organization. And I think the fan base is right in the sense of, like, they're worried, right? In the sense of, you're going to get in, you look at the Atlantic, how nuts it is right now, right? Do you want to go to Florida? Do you have to go and play down in Tampa in the first round? If you can win the division, how important that game is. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think it's lack of effort in those losses that like worry people. It's like when they seem checked out. And I think that's the toughest to take for most people. It is for me, right? When there's nights where it's like your superstars are non-existent, you're going to lose games, right? It's part of the process. Sure. It's part of developing. But the fact of the matter is, the nights where it just feels like everybody is checked out and they're a softer team to play against. And I think the last game there against Florida at home was one for me that like really stood out in a sense where this is a big game here for playing for first in the division. They're missing Marchand's not in the lineup. Chuck's not in the Ekblad's out of the lineup. Like, let's send a message here, and they go out and lay an egg. And I think that gets a little bit disheartening. But I guess also at Leaf fan, you have the Jekyll and Hyde of this team, right? Where I think other teams get more leashes, right? You talk about Florida, if they lose a few games, or Tampa, they've earned the right because they've won cups and they've been there, where this team hasn't. And again, the common denominator is the core, right? We talked about it like the last few weeks. I think Tavares and Nylander get a little bit of a let off for me because they've been so good. But for me, you know, Matthews and Marner, like they have to be good on the big stage. And I think that's worrisome down the stretch when you see those games where they check out.
So I want to ask you guys this, because obviously you're former players in the league. What's it like in that room, Rosie? Because you just talked about it. I think it's a great point, like off the top. The fact that it's really, really loud in the media, and it was loud in terms of the fan base. But inside that room, is it as loud as we think? Like, are they showing up to work and like pissed off and being like, "Oh, did you hear what Jay Rosehill said yesterday?" Is it, does that happen though? Like,
I promise you, they aren't talking about what I said the night before. But especially in Toronto, you block out the media, but you just know, like, you just feel it. Like, I remember going to the practice rink, and it's like, oh fuck, you know, don't be too loud, don't be laughing, don't be caught, you know, telling jokes and yucking it up. And you can see the media through those sliding doors, and they're on their tippy toes. They can't wait. They got to get in there, and everyone wants to know. And it's like, fuck me, is this ever? You feel the tension, right?
Yeah.
But when you're alone and when it's just your team, you don't ride the highs and lows. You don't get emotional. You try to stay level, and your coach tries to tell that. If you get blown out, you know, unless you need a kick in the ass, but usually like, hey, we got to park that one. We know what went wrong. And every day you just try to get a little bit better. Every day you just try to work on your game. Every day you try to, you know, get better as a team, whether you won 3 in a row or have lost 3 in a row, whether you're on a heater or you're in a rut, you're trying to stay level. And the roller coaster goes on outside. And I don't think anyone benefits from these highs and lows. And especially as a goalie, I think Huts could relate to, you probably don't want to be all these highs and lows. You want to stay pretty even keel. And whether you're on a heater, hey, I'm doing the same shit. Whether you're in the rut, hey, I'm doing the same stuff. I just try to get a little better every day, put in my work. And, you know, you believe in yourself and you let the chips fall. It's very different in the locker room. They are not reacting to what goes on outside the way we do, especially in Toronto. Like, look, that's the whole point, is to stay away from that stuff.
I think that's a great point. And I think players they didn't just get to the NHL overnight, right? They've dealt with stuff their whole career. They've been on losing streaks. They've been on bad teams. And like, that's part of the development factor. And I think that's an important factor of some of these guys have been in the American League or whatever league they've been in. They've been in situations where you know how to bounce back. For me personally, as a player, you kind of, like you talked about, not being on Twitter or X and staying away from it. And I even learned as I went on in my career. I met, for example, what stands out to me, I remember one time getting absolutely hammered in Montreal, like 6-1 or something. I had a bunch of buddies there. One of the buddies is here. And there's a group of them came to see me. Like, half of the guys came to see me, half of them didn't, because they were like worried to come see me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who cares? Like, I already processed that. Like, I have my little time after the game to be mad and be upset about what happened, but you move on, you park it, because that's about being a professional. I got to wake up again the next day and do it again. I don't think the outside noise really creeps in. And I also believe that Craig Berube's like a guy that's going to keep that room tight and the leadership there. But the fact of the matter, these guys are pros, and it didn't happen overnight.
Rosie, how'd you deal with that shit as a fighter and 5.5 goals in your career?
Yeah, it was a different
Can't
beast.
forget that. 5.5 goals.
You know, to me, we were talking the other day about like the chaos. I just kind of thrived in chaos. Like, if the game's getting out of hand, like, let me loose. And I want to go. If it's if in the minors, if it's a 3-3 and everyone's dogged and you got off the bus at 3 a.m, I'm like, fucking drop the puck. Let's go. If your routine's thrown off and you got to play a matinee game, which the Leafs did not too long ago, everyone's talking about how hard is this for them to adjust. I love that. I liked chaos. Like, if things are hard and no one knows what's going on, then it's easy. Everyone's fucked. This is difficult for anyone. Just go. And whether I had to fight a heavyweight that night, or they have 3 meatheads on their team, or playing the Bruins or the Islanders, and I know I got to scrap, and some guys going like this in warm up. Yeah, that weighed on you heavy. That was an extra layer to it. But if I knew there's not a chance in hell I'm going to fight anyone that night, I'd still have, to prepare the same and to look at things the same way. It was just an extra level to it, I guess. But it was funny. Everyone thought, oh, the scrapping must have been so hard. It's like, well, I was kind of a mental midget, even if I didn't have to scrap that night too. So the pressure of playing is different for every different person. I looked at the superstars on the team when I was in Toronto, and I just had to get through the media to get to my stall to sit down. They got 20 people grilling them, and they're pissed off, and they can't believe they're bringing that up, and they're looking at the PR guy to yank these guys out of here. They got that whole extra layer to their life, right? So everyone's dealing with their own shit. But there's just no doubt in Toronto, it's just everything's just a little bit full throttle.
Favorite dance partner in the NHL? I just thought about that right now, and Along those lines, and Luke Shen just got traded to Winnipeg, but you obviously know him very, very well. Was there ever a moment where you and Shenner almost went in a game?
No. In training camp, I ran him behind the net. He was wheeling the net, and I stood him up, and he said I bruised his sternum, and it was buggered the rest of the year. So he always gave it to me for that. But I don't know. I was always like, well, you're you, so you think I'm gonna lay off you? Or like it's not
That's
happening. But everyone says that with scrapping, like who's the toughest guy you ever fought, and like McGrattan's come to mind, and the Lucic scrap.
That was. What were you called in that fight, by the way?
Career hatchet, man.
Who called you that?
By our boy.
Yeah. Jack Edwards. Yeah.
Jack Edwards. It was funny. He was a homer for Ness, and he was a homer for Boston. And I understand that. But my point is that any night you get in a scrap when knuckles are flying, any one of those can land on the button and you have the worst fight of your life. I was able to avoid getting knocked out somehow my whole career. I used to knock on wood, and now I don't have to anymore because unless you get me in a scrap at the bar tonight. But I don't have to worry about that anymore. But the point was everyone's tough, especially in that league, and you just can't take anything lightly. A guy that's like a middleweight could knock you out if he lands the right one, and you could hang in there with the heavy and have a great scrap, and a draw could happen, and everyone thinks you're the king of the world. It's if you're throwing bare knuckles, man, anything can happen. So there's not really there's the one guy that was really hard. It's if you're in it, you're in it.
We chatted about this yesterday, Rosie, and I think the American League helps too. Like the guys you're dealing with the American League are like absolute units, right? And I always thought it was nuts, like the American League, what guys had to fight. And again, I think that's part of your development as an athlete, as a player. And they talk about that. Like you got to deal with stuff in the minors too. So then when you get up to the NHL, you're like ready and groomed. And that's why I think it is important for guys to spend some time in the minors. And for me, I had like a routine, right? You talk about structure being broken, and I came from college hockey, which is a little different. Right? You don't play as many games, and you're like, your routine's very set because it's very easy. You only have a certain amount of games. And then I went to pro, and like, you're playing the American League. I was in the coast, riding the bus, like throw everything out the window, right? You get caught in a snowstorm. You got to show up before the game 10 minutes before. Nobody gives a shit. You got to play good.
Yeah.
And then I think for my development as a goalie, and as I started to go, it helped me because then I'm like, all that other stuff doesn't matter. What matters is like, I'm good. I can be good. And then I think I created myself almost like an internal arrogance where I was like, no matter the situation, I was good. I wasn't a cocky player by any means, but I like convinced myself that no matter what, I was going to be good. And I think that's what you see with at times, Willie Nylander, you see it from him, you see it from Marner, but they have to be that way, man. You're not one of the best players in the world, not being internally arrogant.
Well, talk to us about, being an undrafted player. I always looked at goaltenders as being different in the sense that
weird.
Well, obviously,
goalies are
everybody knows that. You're one of the most normal goalies I know.
I don't know if that, I know people say that. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not sure.
There's something under the surface. We got to get some weirdness.
It's kind of weird,
but not to be drafted and to try to battle. I mean, I know what the pipelines look like, and I know what the depth charts look like. And one thing about getting drafted is now you're in that pipeline, and like as a defenseman to get drafted to Tampa, they'd won the cup, and they're like, we know what the formula is. It's big, physical D-man, and they drafted like 9 of us, and I'm like, fucking thanks for this opportunity. Like, how many guys I got to beat. But it's also nice to have someone who says you're part of our team and they help you along. So there's a little give and take. But to be undrafted as a goalie and to know there's only 2, 1, and then 1.5 spots on every single team for you to come out of college, East Coast League, American Hockey League, and then to play as much as you did in the National Hockey League, that took some kind of mental fortitude to just keep pushing people behind you until you're up there in the big league.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, I go back to like being a kid. And so there's one organization in Thunder Bay. It's the AAA program, Thunder Bay Kings, which is like the main one. And it's been great. It's produced a lot of good players, right? Like we've had, the Pyatt brothers, the Stahl brothers, Ryan, Greg Johnson, Robert Bertuzzo, who still plays, Matt Murray. And for me, I never made the team. Right. I was cut all the time. And it wasn't like lack of me being good enough at the time. I just wasn't there. And I feel like I had a lot of shortcomings in my career. So then when the opportunity came to college and I had a tough stretch or something happened, I like knew how to deal with it. And I felt like when I got to the American League, it's a bottleneck, right? You know how it is. You just talked about that, all those guys that were drafted. Now it's like fight or flight, like who's able to deal with it quick enough. Yeah. And so if I had a shit game or I got, they're like, hey, you're not going tonight, and I should have played, I didn't pout about it. I didn't call my mom and dad, my agent. I just was like, processed it, moved on. I got to work harder. What else can I do? So then I think that helped me like gather thick skin as I went along in my career. So then when I was here, obviously playing with Pecorine, I got my real first chance. They'd be like, hey, you're not playing for 10 days. You're going to play this spot. And like, nobody gives a shit if you don't play well. Like, I don't care. Like you always talk about goalies. Well, you got to play and it gets in a rhythm. Well, if someone else can do it, you can do it, right? If you're not going to do it, they'll find someone. And I think as quick as you can just be honest with yourself helps. And I think that, you know, along the way, those building blocks slowly built me into who I was to have success in the NHL.
Two team guys right here, because I teed you up to talk about your scrap in the AHL, and you didn't bite on it.
Oh yeah, I didn't. That was Peter Mrazek, eh?
Yeah.
I actually, you know, it was great. That's a good story. When I was training,
I need to watch
you never
that.
watched this?
Yeah.
Yeah, you might
I bet
think
you've
you might
seen
be a
it,
little
I just
nicer to
didn't
me
put two
after
and two
that, eh?
together.
I've never been knocked out either. I'm 1-0.
Want to know?
He didn't land any on me. I don't think Peter was playing for Grand Rapids, and it was actually Wade Brookbank.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he was on their team. So we were getting smoked. I think Tatar and Nyquist had lit me up for 6 at that point. We did all these penalties. They threw guys out. Big brawl breaks out. So Wade Brookbank is just filling some kid, some D-man. Mrazek tries to jump him, so I skate down, and it's pink in the rink night, and we have pink jerseys on. It was unbelievable. So I fed him his lunch. He was a young kid from Czech. I don't think he had ever been in a fight before. I didn't know how to fight either. I was just like, all I know is I got to punch you before you punch me.
Snap show, man. He's an absolute snap. We're gonna have to. You got to break it down sometime, I think.
The goalie fights
Yeah.
are
Oh.
the gear that they have is meant to be like big and not like real. I don't know. It just seems like it's hard to be nimble in that stuff and your edges as well with the pads on. I find it hilarious when you guys scrap. I love it when you do. It's so bloody exciting. But it's funny you bring up Brookbank. I played with him too. When I was younger, he was with Vancouver, and my buddy's like, you should see this new tough guy in Vancouver, Wade Brookbank. He's a stud. And I was like, you know, watch him. And I just knew Wade Brookbank, this big scary bastard. And I played with him in the minors, and he was like, he had no shoulders. He didn't have an ounce of muscle on him. In the bus, he was wearing his glasses, reading his book. And I'm like, dude, this guy's not what I really thought. And then when he scrapped, he had this ho-hum there, squaring off, and he's ho-hum. And I'm like, what? I thought this guy was a murderer. And then he went to the scrap, and he was so technical. He like pretzeled this guy up, got free, and just murdered him. And and then I realized, I talked to him, and you know, he was like, oh, you just got to think your way through and just be technical about it and everything. And I'm like, wow, what a there's so many different styles to scrapping that I always like picking guys' brains to say, like, what did you think? And what was your strategy? And what was your mindset going into a scrap? And Brookbank stands out as a guy that had a very unique one.
It's funny you say that because I remember the brawl, and it was nuts. Like, they threw me in the penalty box, and then it ended up being a whole bench brawl. Everybody's fighting. They throw me in the box, and then they kicked. Everyone who fought on the ice got kicked out, and me. So 5 guys go into the room, and the goalie, and we go in, and the other 5 of us, Brookie goes into a stall and just like takes his gloves off, like puts it down, calculated his helmet, like just another day. All the others were all just like going, these guys out there, who'd you fight? That was nuts. Brookie's like, relax, kids.
It's funny. The guys' intensity levels are different.
I've always wanted to be like in a room, like after a guy scraps, after a big win, and just the boys. Because the one thing I noticed is like I go to the game and how quickly the guys rosy are out of the room. I'm sure it's every barn where like they're out the door before the media even gets in there. It's wild to me.
Well, that's the media
Yeah,
scares them out too.
true.
No one wants to be in there
In
with the
Toronto,
media, right?
They don't want to talk to me.
Yeah, usually you go in the room, and it's depending on the way the game goes, right? Like,
Yeah.
and guys are in the gym, it's a quick turnaround, and I think you get used to it. But it's if it's a big game though, there's a little more fun going on.
Yeah, it depends what happened, but everyone's got their routine afterwards. You know, you get down to your shit. You might want to ride the bike. You might want to stretch. You might want to get on this machine, or you know, do X, Y, or Z, cold tub, whatever it is that you
Or
do.
eat, backup goal, yeah.
I noticed that a lot. The Leafs work out after they play.
Yeah, you have.
Like I hear the weights clanking after the game.
Well, they used to smoke darts and drink beer, and it turns out that's not the
Yeah.
ideal.
Some idiot started working
situation.
out and screwed it for everybody. Hey,
But
It's a lot
I
different.
do miss one thing that's unique to the game is when you get in a scrap and say there's less than 5 minutes left and you go into the locker room, it's completely empty. You're the only one in there. Your adrenaline is about here. You are completely out of gas. So you're trying to catch your breath. So you're exhausted and weak and you can barely lift your hands, but your adrenaline's at 12. And then the trainer's in there. What do you need, Rosie? And he doesn't want to bug you, but you're doing this. And then you're like, my knuckles are fucked. I need ice or whatever. And then, okay, so he brings you your shit. And then he brings you your Gatorade. He's like, you all good? And you're like, yeah, good. I think my jersey's ripped. And you're trying to get, and it's like this unique little moment. And then like inevitably 3 minutes later, the horn goes and all the boys come in and say what they say. It's kind of just a unique thing. I just remembered that I
That's
came
a cool
to.
aspect. At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Again, we're live on location here in Nashville. Let's get a bit more into the team again. And I'm happy you're here. Obviously, talk about the crease. I'm often asked by friends or people, you know, around, how do you view this Leafs team? And I've been consistent all year in saying that the crease, I feel really, really confident about the crease. And I think it's a big story right now, Huts.
I think rightfully so, right? I think Anthony Stolarz has been unbelievable, especially the way the season started, right? He comes in, obviously, with his accolades, his good numbers, and you're hesitant, right? Because you're playing behind Bobrovsky, you're in Florida, and he's been rock solid. obviously Joseph Wall missing early in the season. Stolarz kind of put his stamp on this season, right? Then he's out. Then Wall carries the mail for a while. Now you're at a point where like Joseph Wall looked really, really good. He's looked very, very good. And I've been adamant about this all year. I think his ceiling is still higher, right? Like Anthony Stolarz is a little bit older. He's a bigger body. He is who he is, right? I don't really see him stealing a playoff run. Like when I look at Joseph Wall, I look at a guy like if this team does go the distance, like you could potentially say like a Conn Smythe Trophy winner. Like I honestly think that he has a higher ceiling. And what I like from him is like, that's a stretch, but you know what I mean? I'm just saying like,
I get it.
I don't see Stolarz having that ability to like be that, like he's going to be steady. He's going to be good. I think you know what you're getting with him. I think the upside on Wall is just his mental capacity, right? You see how he manages it. Like, and it seems like he's got it all together. In the short time I kind of got to know him in Toronto, he just seems like wise beyond his years. And I think that's something that's so important for a goalie, you know, a younger guy. You're in this market. How do you manage that? And for me, I think there's a lot of value there, but going into this, I think it's smart to make sure you have 1A, 1B here. Because at the end of the day, they both got to play.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that the other day, like a pathway in the playoffs, you're going to need both guys. Like for sure.
Well, every time a goalie has a good game, it's like, who's the number one? And it's like November. It's like, who gives a shit?
We're doing that right now again. I think it was
I know everybody
is back on Joseph Wall.
I think it's going to be, what have you done for me lately? Like it's
there he is.
We are so back.
It's a what have you done for me lately league though. And I mean, that last week coming to the playoffs, you know, or a bit before that, you're going to see who's really going, and they're going to start to lean towards one guy, and it doesn't matter who it is. And that's the beauty of it. Like everyone's like, oh, you got to pick a number one. Why do you have to pick a number one? There's going to be a number one, and that's the guy that starts the playoffs. Yes. And that's whoever is feeling it lately, and they're going to put that guy in and away he goes. And the good thing is, there is competition. If it doesn't go well, it's not like, well, we're hooped, we're done. Like our starter Hellebuck's not doing it tonight. No, you can go to Wool, you can go to Stoley. They both have their advantages, and honestly, I think they're both mentally tough, and neither one of them is going to be rattled. So it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I think that is really important. But in that being said, it's like the way they're going to defend too, right? Like what we've seen in the past is like, there's certain teams that can like score their way to a Stanley Cup, right? We talked about Colorado. Like Darcy Kemper didn't have great numbers that year, but that was like the only team, like you're going to have to do it on both ends. I think the template I like their back end now too, which I think helps.
Yeah.
And I think the experience for me, I guess my only takeaway would be, is there enough time now to get everyone to gel well? Like adding Carlo, adding guys, getting everyone healthy. We've seen so many injuries this year because the more you can make the game predictable for the goalie, it's going to help, right? I look back to my year in St. Louis where I had a really strong season. The next year they won the Stanley Cup and Jordan Binnington was very good, but their back end, Jay Bouwmeester, Alex Pietrangelo, Colin Parenko, Joel Edmondson, big bodies, like they made the game easy. And you don't have to be physical anymore as a defenseman. You just have to take up space, get a stick, get a leg, get something in the way, and be in sync with the other guy and your goalie. It makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and I still get PTSD thinking about Marty Marincin in that era. And of course, I was the Leafs radio host, and it was just really, really difficult. And you compare it now, Rosie, to this blue line. I think it's a good point. And I think that's a bigger reason. And I know you're always careful this time of year as we get closer to the playoffs, but start to believe more and more in sort of the framework of this team with Craig Berube, the back end, and of course the crease.
Yeah, I mean, on the back end, Tanev and McCabe, I've always played with them, so you could kind of touch on a little bit Huts, but he's kind of that dad, that father figure out there. Like he's just strong. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't get rattled very easily. It doesn't seem like from the outside. And then you pair that with Tanev, like what's their plus minus? Is it like a plus 30,
really good.
Like it's out of control, and they're the ones that are logging the minutes. You look at Tanev; he's getting matched up every night against McKinnon there the other night. Like, how fun is that? You'd think that'd be kind of a recipe to take some minuses, and it's like, well, it's McKinnon. No, he still rattles off the numbers, and I think that when you're on a team and you have guys like that, and it's no different in youth hockey. Like this year, I'm coaching a U13 team, and we have like these 4-stud D-men. And it's just like easy. It just feels like your D zone is just so full. It feels like it's just bloated where there's nowhere to go. And like you said, you just got to be in lanes, take up space, disrupt them. Don't let them cook. And that's what this decor is doing a lot better than I think decors in the past. And again, like, Morgan Riley, not to pull a negative, but his plus minus is minus 19. And people are like, oh, well, that's a stat that's like outdated and it doesn't really matter. Nah, in certain stances, maybe. In a game, maybe, but when you're looking at plus 32 and minus 19, and this guy logs more ice time, I'm sorry. Like, if that guy can find any semblance of his game just to add to what they already have back there, and then your lower level third pairing guy is like a Benoit, who I love, I mean, all of a sudden you're looking mean, and it just takes the pressure off the goalie, takes the pressure off everyone else.
Yeah, I think it's important too. The fact of the matter is Morgan Riley's obviously not had the season that we've wanted. I think everybody knows that. He takes a lot of abuse, but I also think adding Carlo now and like getting him slotted a bit better is going to be so important down the stretch here, right? And I think we look at a lot of teams, and you know, I've had a chance to talk to different people now. We've interviewed so many people. Your stars have to be your stars, right? That is like rule number one if you want to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But it's that like those guys around the outside, then you get guys slotted, right? They're playing better matchups. They're playing more like particular minutes that suit their game better. And I think that's going to be important down the stretch here for this back end. And then any team that goes on a run, that 5-6 pairing, there's always going to be a 6 guy that goes in and out. Like Craig Berube did the same thing in the Stanley Cup finals. Robert Bertuzzo and Joel Edmondson just flip-flop each game. If they lost a game, the other guy would go in. And like sometimes they just make changes to make changes. And I think they're going to be set up well. And I think for Craig Berube to have that extra depth there is going to be real important in the stretch.
What's that checklist down the stretch look like? Because obviously we're going to talk a lot about first in the division, the Florida Panthers. Of course, they win 1-0 last night against Columbus. Like that, there's such a juggernaut. They're banged up. They're going to be a tough out, but Tampa's still in the mix. What's that checklist look like for you guys?
For me, it's consistency. Like I want to like throw a dart at the roster, whether it lands on Domi or lands on Matthews or lands on Stolars or lands on Carlo. Like, how are you going to do your job to as close to the best of your ability as possible? And if everyone's kind of pulling from the same rope, and that's where identity comes in, that's where a system that everyone's buying into comes in. I played on teams before where the identity and the system is this, and you got some Russian dickhead who's like, I don't play that way and I do my own fucking thing. And it's like, well, I guess how much success those teams have? Just about zero. Yeah. Everyone feels it, and it's just wave after wave you come at them. And if they can get some semblance of consistency where everyone's kind of playing to their height, I think they have enough talent and ability on this team where if everyone's up there, I think they can like seriously go on a run.
And for me, it starts in the room, right? I think you talk to any good coach or good team, they'll tell you that the coach isn't even coaching. Like John Cooper said that how many times about his group, right? Like they coach themselves, right? He's pretty much just showing up and like telling them which line is going out. I think that is going to be important. I think just like a shot in the arm, right? I think Domi's been really good as of late. I think Scott Lawton coming in, maybe lit a fire under him. And I know it's been critical, but we look at last year's playoff run too. And I guess I'm defending Lawton in a sense because I know it's a big transition in where he's at. But look at last year, like Connor Brown in Edmonton. Like he had a horrible season. Everybody was on him all year. And then who was one of their best playoff players? He was one of the best players. Janmark, right? These are guys that are like capable players. You need your stars to be your stars, but these guys are good. And I think there's enough depth there to find a chemistry while you're on the fly trying to win.
Yeah. And to answer for me, I think it's got to be consistency, piggybacking off what Rosie said, where it's like every game I want predictability from this team, because that's, to me, that's been the big story. Is like we've seen moments like this 3-win run rate now where you're like, you start to believe. And then there's like those momentarily lapses that we saw, against Florida, we saw against Ottawa. And I think there's always that wonder, are we going to see Keefe's Leafs come back? And I don't know. No, like I'm just saying, like and I'm speaking for Leafs Nation. I'm sure you guys feel the same way, where there's always that moment where you're like, well, what team is this? But I think the proof's going to be in the pudding this time, Rosie.
And to me, it's like, say you lose a game in the playoffs, right? I can be on board with it if you go down swinging.
Yeah.
What I can't handle is what I saw last year, where you go out with this limp dick effort that is just embarrassing. And I'm like, the clock just ticks down, and then it's over. And I'm going, where was the fight? Yeah. Like, did anyone care enough to go down swing? Like, someone do something different. Someone's riding you into the crease and then gives you a little shot. Instead of taking it like a bitch, why don't you feed them your stick and say, you're going to eat fucking lumber if you take away any of my space? Like, go down swinging. Don't pull up when someone takes away and try the backhand sauce. Don't try to stay away and, I hope they give me some space today. Go down swinging. Do something different. Get uncomfortable. And if you lose because it wasn't your night, I can get behind that. I can't get behind the chicken shit hockey that I've seen. And I have reason to believe with the people they put in place, including Craig Berube, that stuff is gone.
Yeah, I hope so too. Because I feel like sometimes with this team, it leaves me wanting more, even in the losses, right? Like I think those are the ones that hurt the most, where you play against certain teams like the Tkachuk brothers, and we talk about Marchand, like they're losing a game, like they're like going to hurt you at the end of the game. They're going to like send a message and put a stamp on this game. Like, you may have beat us, but like you're not doing it again.
Leave
right?
a mark.
Yeah. And I think that is something where it leaves me wanting more. But like to your point about, whoever goes down in the playoffs, I feel like that's come and gone now. Like now you have to, like, I feel like you have to win here. Like you've got to a point where it's like, so now if they have a good series and they don't win, are we going to be like, well, they did really good. They tried really hard. Now it's like, no, you have to win. We've been dealing with the same bullshit for how many years? It's like time to do this. If not, I think you got to start moving pieces out.
We're going to talk a lot about that over the next couple of weeks. Hit that like button, that subscribe button at the Leafs Nation 401.
Getting fired up, Rosie.
Yeah, I know. See that?
I love this shit.
I was going to be like, but how do you quantify, like, what are you guys going to view as like a successful season, Rosie, when it comes to the playoffs?
I think I said it opening day on this pod. I mean, you got to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. And if you get into some kind of a war and let the chips fall where they may, at least I can say they took steps forward, and that's something to be decent. I don't know if it's Stanley Cup or bust. I can call it a successful team, and they made moves that made them better. And at the end of the day, are you proud of their performance? Are you proud of, hey, they put up a hell of a fight and lost in the Eastern Conference Finals? They were one of the top 4 teams in the league at the end of the day. Okay, that's what happens. Sometimes, not everyone can win, but it's that or bust. I mean, first round exit, second round exit. We've already seen that with teams that weren't as good as this one. And like Hut said, the difference now is change is coming if you don't get the job done. Like, that's just inevitable. And maybe that's what they need to light a fire under their ass and get it going. But they're not going ahead with this group in the same way that they have if they get bounced in the same fashion that they have in the past.
Well, I think the fact of the matter is the common denominator here is like the players, the core is the only thing that hasn't changed, right? We've changed coaches, we've changed GMs. There's been so many different scenarios. And yes, I know you just can't go out and get other superstars, right? That's not how it works. It's really hard to not have them homegrown, especially in today's market, if you're going to overpay. But in that sense, I'm kind of with you there. I feel like anything past the second round, I would be like, I think you could hang your hat on that. Like, if you lose in the first round again,
it's
like even second round, I think second round, you'd struggle with it because it's going to be a battle, right? Especially you look at the Atlantic. That's why I think getting first is important. Like, granted, everyone has that theory of like, you got to beat them anyway. You're going to have to play good teams, but getting a good matchup, like even you look in the Central right now, like I'm sure Winnipeg is licking their chops that Dallas and Colorado have to play each other, right? Like if I'm Toronto, I'm like, let's get rid of one of these Florida teams and we'll get them in the second round.
Yeah. And to me, just going off that point, I think a lot of it is just like how they play, to your point, where it's like you get to the playoffs and it's a 7-game series and they're in it every game and they're scratching and clawing, because there's just been way too many games you talked about, Rosie, where it's like you leave the playoff game specifically and you're like that's what they had in them. That's a team that supposedly wants to win a Stanley Cup. And that's the feel I don't want to feel anymore. So for me, I think it's got to be 2 rounds, but it has to have that feel in general that we're a different team come the playoffs.
And the reality is with Leafs Nation and where they're at right now, even if it's a second round bounce in overtime of Game 7 against Florida, I mean, that's a tall order, and you did pretty goddamn good to get to that. But if you're 1 goal short of that Eastern Conference Final, no one's going to give a rip. It'll be the same as a first round bounce if that is the case. And they could get that far and get into that big of a battle. At the end of the day, when everyone's analyzing the next day, I don't give a rip how close. A day late and a dollar short doesn't cut it.
Yeah, there's the leash is gone now, right? I feel like this is, it's go time. And I think that is you look back to like the chant, like we won Florida, right? And like how that went. So, like honestly, like getting into
didn't go well.
Right. Like they're at a point now where you have to win, right? I think it's understandable, right? I think everybody knows that, but that's where I truly believe like it's on those guys in the room, right? Especially trade deadline's gone. There's no life raft coming to save them now. Like these are the guys you got. And I also think that like these guys, they want to stamp their legacy on Toronto, right? In my opinion, I think you would want, like, imagine winning a Stanley Cup in Toronto. Like, guys are legends that never won anything there, right? Just being part of that. And I think that's like, at the end of the day, they're all made their money. They all have whatever. Now is their chance to try to win.
We're like gods here. I think that was the quote from
hey, they're close.
They're close. Specific player on the Toronto Maple Leafs compared the team to being gods. So.
No, I stick up for Mitchie on that.
We're not gonna cover. We
Take
understand.
care of us here.
Exactly. At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're live here in Nashville. This segment is brought to you by our friends over at Greta Bar. Whether it's before, during, or after the game, it's a place to be on King Street West. Awesome street food and wicked arcade games, 590 King Street West. Greta Bar, let the games begin. So we're going tomorrow night, boys. Leafs and Predators, Bridgestone Arena. I mean, you played for the Preds. You've played in that barn. It's going to be rocking. Doesn't matter if the Preds are shit this season.
I think it matters a little bit.
Yeah.
They looked really bad the
They're
other
done?
night. They looked
Cooked,
really,
yeah.
really bad the other night.
Hockey
Just
Night in Canada, not gonna be
defensively,
good?
I think they'll try to answer the call. I love they're on the Leafs time zone too. McDavid
know.
complained about that too. It's games at 6, not 7, so that'll stir the pot a bit. But honestly, it's a great atmosphere. It's a fun rink to get up for. Coming off the back-to-back though, right? And then like the day off here. Early game, I just worry about like the slow start is my only concern here for tomorrow.
The fact the Preds they lost to Anaheim.
Yeah.
I mean, and we were standing on the rooftop earlier this afternoon. I'm looking over at the Bridgestone and I said, look at the guys they got on the posters on the side of the building. I'm like, you're telling me that team just lost to Anaheim and they were like front runners for the cup on July 2nd, and today they're just in the absolute doghouse. And the Leafs, talking about sports betting before, sometimes the Leafs, you just got to go against what you think should happen. And that's usually what happens. And I'm a little bit worried. Not worried. I've seen it before where you go into a game that you should absolutely unequivocally win and everything's set up in place. Your table is set. Here you go. Go get your win. It's like, it's the obvious thing to do. And they don't do that. They do something else. So I just hope they're prepared. If they're prepared and they start right, they should take that game.
Who starts the goal?
I think we see Wall tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think we go to, he's been too good not to go to him. Stolarz just played. And again, like I always circle back to that time. I know he had his pebble in his knee and we went to it. He had played so good in that New Jersey game. You remember Matthews got the overtime winner and then they went back to him in Anaheim. And that's when he had or in Toronto against Anaheim. And I never understood that because he's a guy that hasn't played a ton of minutes. And like, you got to be smart. Like the adjustment from being a 30 game guy to a 50 game guy is a huge adjustment. I went through it. And I think he's at similar age as me. And when I did it, so I didn't just be careful. Wall's going, just keep them both hot and humming.
So your mind's changing a bit.
No, I don't think that I do like Wall. I just think the fact of the matter is being smart with him because Stolarz played last night. You got to go to Wall tomorrow.
Is it confirmed? And Rosie will go to you. Do you think they know who their game one guy is going to be? Or are they still figuring it out?
I don't think that they do, and I don't think that it matters. Like I said, it's what have you done for me lately, league? I don't think there is a front runner right now. I think for a while there it was Stoli, but he goes down and then it Wool like held down the fort pretty good, but we know he can get hurt if he gets run down a little bit. I really just take your pick. They're both very good. I think it's what have you done for me lately? And I think right before the playoffs start, when everyone's kind of last minute prep, I think they'll go to the guy that they think is the best to start the game in 4 days and say, you're our guy, you're starting just the way you have all season long. And I don't really know who that is. I don't know if anyone does.
So we saw the triumphant return last night of David Kampf. And I think roster is going to be something, obviously, we talk about a lot leading up to game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs, regardless of the opponent. But is there a certain roster that you like? I know we talk quite a bit, me and Rosie, about the Lions and how they're jumbled up and this and that. And you see Marner and Matthews together. Now they're not. Is there a guy, and I bring this up quite a bit, Max Pacioretty, it's just my opinion. I think he's going to be a factor, we'll say, somebody that's going to be in the mix for playing time in game one in the next 10 games here. But how do you view the roster right now?
I think my biggest thing would be like finding an identity line, right? Like we talk about a line that can go out there and stir it up, right? And I think Pacioretty, how physical he has been this year is going to be a big factor come playoff time, right? And now you're talking about where maybe it's a night where the boys aren't going, right? I know you guys got to get hot. You're going to have to get third line scoring. You're going to have to get some depth scoring to really push this team over the top. But I like the idea of getting Pacioretty in there and creating some chaos and being physical, pinning teams in the other end, maybe drawing a penalty and getting your big boys into the game, right? And I feel like some teams I've played on and I've watched throughout the NHL is like, it almost sets the table for series for getting guys into the game. And I think that's going to be important, the depth of this. And again, it's going to come down to secondary scoring, right? I still think Willie's going to be great. I think Mitch is going to have a great playoff with that confidence and where he's at, right? He might not he can't create the same way that he creates in the regular season. Let's just be totally honest. The game's not ref the same in the playoffs, which is sometimes I struggle with a little bit because it's like you have to play a certain brand of hockey to get in. And then all of a sudden you have to throw that out the window and you got to change the way you play because it's playoff hockey, where it's like, how do you build a team around that? So I feel like they will create offense. It's going to come down to goaltending, obviously. And I think depth scoring for this team.
In my mind, to your last point, I think the smart general managers build a team that's going to be successful in the playoffs. Yes. You know what the brand is. You know that the refs put the whistle away, and you know everyone ramps it up to 12. One of my favorite days of the season is opening night of the playoffs when you're clicking through channels and everyone is like, every time you click a channel, the crowd's going ballistic because everyone's running each other through the board saying, we're here, we're ready, we've prepped for, 7 months and we're ready to go. And you build a team for that style. But as far as camp, I really think Pacioretty is going to play a factor in that. Like you say, if it gets down to the grittiness, you want that veteran presence, you want that understanding. And, you saw it with his PTO at the beginning of the year. Like, here's a chance for you to prolong your career, for you to be a part of this group. We're not going to offer you a contract. We're not going to give you that. You got to go prove yourself. And he went out and did exactly that. So I think that with his experience level and his pedigree and what they expect of him, which isn't to be Mitch Marner, I think that he's going to be a factor in the playoffs, and he might bump somebody like that out.
Here's a good one. Ryan Reaves. Do we see him play a playoff game for the Maple Leafs?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I think a lot of people think it's a no-brainer, but if they're buzzing going down the stretch, I don't see a reason to put him in.
Mm-hmm.
If they're struggling and they're getting pushed around and ran through the rink and no one wants to be physical and no one wants to get it deep and chase it, then he would be the logical choice to put in.
Yeah.
But I think if off opening night, he's absolutely not there. And if things go well, I don't think you'll see him unless they have to.
Speaking of seeing him, where the hell is he? I don't think he is reported to the AHL either.
I don't know. Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday.
Yeah,
no one knows where he is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know if that's weird. Usually when you to get a guy off of your payroll, off the cap, you got to send him through waivers and give everyone else a chance to nab him. They've done that, but usually that's to report to the minors. And I've been through that. I know what that feels like. And you go across the hallway and you play on the Marlies, and he hasn't done that yet. I don't know, to be honest with you, because I've never seen it, what the rule is to go through waivers. Okay, he's off the payroll. He's still getting paid, but he's off the cap.
Yeah.
Can you still be with the team and practice with the team? Is he even practicing with the team? It's like he's a ghost.
I think we would have seen him.
There's like an intro. So it's funny, if you go to a game at Scotiabank Arena, they do like an intro before the team comes on the ice, and it's Ryan Reaves, whether he's playing or not. Like,
cheering him on.
Yeah, and now, so you'd see him on the big screen. He'll be with the guys in his civvies, like in his gym workout stuff, as they're going out to the ice. I haven't seen him the last couple games.
And that's the Leafs.
Yes. So it's really bizarre. Like, he has to be skating somewhere in Toronto, right?
Well, if you're not playing in the goddamn Stanley Cup.
Well, I was a
playoffs,
Leaf at one point.
that.
I was living in Arizona, so
True.
they'll pull some shady stuff off just to make the cap work.
That's true. Yeah. But, I just wonder about him factor wise. And there's a lot. Rosie loves the conversation about LTIR, right?
I don't like what teams are capable of doing. And if they
look at Florida, they got an all-star team coming off the IR soon.
Well, I know that's not right. It's not how the games. There's a reason there's a cap, and it's to try to create parity and to try to keep it competitive and honest. And when you ice a team in the playoffs, which is the most important part of the season, and everyone else is under this amount, and you're at $104 million, everyone else is at 88 or whatever the hell it is that year. Yeah. It's just not right. And you see teams win the Stanley Cup on that predication. It's wrong.
Yeah. Look, I mean, push comes to shove, we get to the Stanley Cup playoffs, boys, and we've had this conversation so many times. If Toronto's star players are their star players and are making a difference in the series, they're a tough team to beat. That, like, I always bring up, and we always have this convo too, guys, like, who do I want to see them play in the playoffs? I think the Leafs beat themselves on a yearly basis.
Yeah, I do. I think so too. I'm with you there. I think the superstars have to be the superstars. I guess, Matthews is a bit concerning for me. I just don't think he's been himself, but I hope come playoff time.
I don't understand that. So, like, those games, Rosie, against like Florida and Ottawa, he was like really tentative. And then all of a sudden against Calgary, he shows up. And then the other day he was good. Last night I thought he was okay. But it's been a bizarre season where it's like you have no clue what the hell's happening behind the scenes. Like, we find out this guy's in fucking Germany. Like, what?
And for that exact reason, I think the obvious thing is to believe that he's not healthy. And I've had injuries before where some days you feel all right and you can move, and then some days you just can't. And if he's in the lineup still and he's having an off day and he can't tend to move, you're not going to notice him. And when he loosens up and he feels like he can get loose and fire on, at least most of his cylinders, he's still pretty deadly. And I think you see that, but it's also tough to compare him to last year when he's ripping off almost 70 goals and he's the best goal scorer in the world. And you're used to seeing him just bury from everywhere at will. When he doesn't have it or he's a little bit injured, it looks like a far cry from what you're used to.
How do guys feel this time of year? They're already bringing that up a lot, that everybody's banged up right now, are
Yeah,
they?
but you're always banged
Yeah.
up, right? Like, you get it, Rosie. Like, I think the only time you're healthy is like the summer, when you're like literally before camp. There's always something going on, and guys just play through everything, right? I think that's just the culture of hockey and where we're at. It's just a matter of being like strategic now down the stretch, in my opinion, because yes, you're jockeying for position. It's going to be a dogfight for a lot of teams. I feel like there's a big chunk of teams jockeying for position in their divisions. Then there's a big chunk of teams just trying to get in that last wild card spot, or if the Sens can hold that last one. But the fact of the matter is, I think being strategic so you're peaking at the right time right now, because there's no way to catch up, especially after a year where we've kind of seen a Four Nations Cup hangover for some guys, some injuries, some things going on. And Matthews chasing 70 goals last year, he didn't seem like he was the same, coming into this season. So it's hard, because this time of year, the games just come on hot and heavy, especially after a break like that. They're really making up games here.
I think it's the process too, because if you guys remember at the beginning of the year, a lot of people in the media and us too were talking about Matthews and what it looks like. How could he have a successful season where he scores 35 or 40 goals, but it translates to better success in the Stanley Cup playoffs? And ultimately we're there, and there's a lot of hesitation with how we feel about the player right now, Rosie.
Well, we haven't had the chance to watch the playoffs yet, so that story is yet to be written. But it's like Morgan Riley the other year. He had a garbage year, and he stood up big in the playoffs. And all anyone talks about is how great it was that year. You can erase everything that may have been negative in the regular season with the big playoff run. Boston Matthews scores 3 big goals in a series and is on fire and chipping in all the time consistently the next series, and they get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, no one's going to remember that he was a little bit off or looked hurt here and there. And you can compare it to other markets. Look at Edmonton right now. They just had McDavid and Draisaitl go in to get imaging done to find out how injured they actually are. Can you imagine? We have McDavid and Draisaitl, and they're going to get MRIs right now, both of them. The place would start on fire.
Yeah.
It's not unique to Toronto.
Yeah, this trip would be canceled if we had all those guys out. But it's the matter of the fact that now that we have to judge him by the playoffs, right? Where he's going to go and wipe his regular season away. You see it all the time now. Even the year McDavid's had, they're strategically now trying to set themselves up for success. I think that's what we're going to have to see as we move on to the playoffs.
Breaking news coming in from Bet365, where every nail-biting overtime win is a barn burner. Every face-off, hat-trick, power play, shot on goal, penalty shot, and every suspenseful minute in between is amazing. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, an official partner of the NHL. Download the Bet365 app and use the code NATION. That's NATION, NATION, to get in on the game. Must be 19 or older, Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, visit connexontario.ca. So this is where we lay the bets on the game. I like the Maple Leafs puck line tomorrow night, Bridgestone Arena. And since he knows that Jay Rosehill, his former teammate, is here, Scott Lawton, ATG tomorrow night.
Oh, let's go.
I like it. There we go.
How about you guys?
What's the puck line? That's probably minus 300 still, the way the Preds are playing. So honestly, I like that too. And I take the team total under on I think it's going to be a good game for Joseph Woll. What's usually in motion stays in motion. I expect him to be good tomorrow.
I've got Willie Nylander over 1.5 points. I think he's going to have a night. He tends to kind of, be quiet and then remind you who he is. And I think with the vibe of this place, it's got Willie written all over it. I think he's going to pop off tomorrow. Fired
up, boys. We're going to be at Bridgestone Arena tomorrow night and then back in the mix on Monday for Leafs Morning Take. This has been a tremendous time. Once again, Huts, can't thank you enough for pulling this off, bud.
Yeah, no problem. This is deadly. Just worked my whole life to make the NHL, get this place just to put your show on, man.
I'd like to thank everybody here on location. You guys are the best. The first ever Nation Vacation, I think, has been a major success. And got to mention the guys behind the scenes making sure we get on air here. Producer Vic, Zach, and Zach's roommate, Ryan, is now part of the team.
Yeah, shout out.
We got to pay the guy, but he's taking pics. So appreciate it, everybody. You guys have killed it. And that's it, boys. Let's go to the game tomorrow.
Right on.
At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll talk on Monday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.